Good afternoon. This is Linda Melky, and this is Miss Linda Melky Quilts. I'm back again after a holiday, and I've just finished this quilt. It took me about 2 weeks to finish this easy peasy quilt made out of squares because I came home from a holiday and I had a terrible cough. Terrible cough. My voice was gone. It's sort of back now, but it's not perfect yet. But this quilt's a winner, so I hope you enjoy this video. Miss Linda Milky Quilts, enjoy this one. First of all, I made a bunch of 9 patches, and then I just received a very generous donation of fabric from a friend of mine who was sorting out her stash and decided that she didn't need these things and would I be able to use them. So I am sorting some things out that I was given. Now, there's a lot of leftover things in this pile of fabric that I've been given. Pieces that have been used for something, and this is the leftover bit that got cut off from something. But there's not just one of them. There's a whole stack of these, all of these big pieces of light blue fabric with an angle cut on the end. A lot of them. Now, if I want to use these for something make a purpose for them, instead of just cutting off this angle and having to make a half square triangle, if I cut them into strips this way, I get more of the real estate of these ends here, and I can make strips, and then I just have a little triangle at the end that I can use for something, maybe, or maybe it will go into one of the leftover bins that go to make cat beds. But right now, some of them are not cut evenly either. They have crooked edges. But what I've been doing is there is a selvage edge on the end, and I can put maybe 3 or 4 of them together on my cutting table and cut 2.5-inch strips. I think that would be something that is very useful, because I also received a lot of 2.5-inch strips that have been partially used, not partially used, but I've got a lot of blue in this donation, so I'm making something blue. Blue, blue, blue. So the first thing I'm going to do is place these pieces on my cutting board with the selvage end to align on the cutting board. So I have at least a straight edge to start with. And I'm just going to stack a few of these up on top of each other. And then I will start using my long ruler and cut 2.5-inch strips from these. All right. 2.5-inch strips. I can put my ruler edge on the selvage and just make a straight edge on one side. Then I will turn it over on my cutting mat and use the straight edge and the selvage edge. And the first cut I'm going to make is a 5-inch cut. Because it's easier to cut along. You may have noticed that my voice is a little bit hoarse. I went away on a holiday and I came home with a cold. I'm telling you, this cold has been draining me for the last week. I've been home for almost a week, and I've just been in bed coughing and hacking. It's not fun when you go away and you bring something home like that. So now I am just doing the same thing with the blue strips. I have a lot of those 2.5-inch strips already cut, and I'm just adding the final cut that I can make them into 2.5-inch squares. Once I have a pile of 2.5-inch squares in blue and 2.5-inch squares in light blue, I can then proceed to make my 9 patches. I lay the squares out on my cutting table in the order that I want to sew them, making sure that half of the squares are going to be dark blue in the outer corners and half of the squares are going to be light blue in the outer corners. So I have a complement of squares to make a checkerboard pattern on the wall. And then it's so easy just to chain piece the squares together to make a 9 patch. Press them out carefully so that they're good to go. So I always think that when I start a project and how I select what I'm going to do, sometimes it's just what filters to the top of the piles in my sewing room. But sometimes it really is going to be affected by my state of mind. And since I have a cold and I'm feeling a little bit blue, I think this blue quilt is going to be just the key to sort of get me through this week. I like the color green with blue. And so when I've been looking at little bits and pieces of things, I've been pulling out pieces of green. And something with patterns, sure, that's fine. And just various greens that have a nice look together. Green is sometimes there's yellow green and there's blue green, and sometimes it makes a difference which one you use with the blues. So I have to kind of audition things a little bit more. For example, these together versus this. This one has a bit more of a yellow in or a blue in, and this one maybe is a little bit more less intense than this one. So if I'm making a scrappy quilt, I don't have enough of this to do all of the squares, and I don't have enough of this to do all of the squares. So it's going to be scrappy, and they all sort of add to the flavor of the quilt. But I have enough of this blue, light blue, to do as many 9 patch blocks as I want. So that's what I'm going to work on. Pressing is very important to get a good seam. I always try to press out the bigger pieces of my fabric that I'm using because they've been in a bin, they might have been folded, and it's easier to get an accurate measurement if you press them. And once I have the 9 patches done, I always like to press seams to the darker side of the fabric, and then I press the back side so the seams are going towards the dark side, and then I press the front to make it very uniform. When I line up the ruler to cut the 9 patch on the diagonal, I just make sure that I press hard enough to go through the seams at the intersections. And then it's easy to sew 2 opposite sides together, then the other 2 opposite sides, and you can press the seam allowance one way on the two sides, and then on the other one you can press them out so that it isn't bulky at the corners. For this kind of a project, you can start with any size square. I used 2.5-inch squares, made a 9 patch, cut in the diagonal, then I measured this length, and that was the size of the green square that I made. But if you used 3-inch squares, your length would be longer. All you do is measure the length and make this square the same length. Because when you sew this together, you want to have the ends together. So it's very easy to make something the size that you want, make something that you like, and use the things that you have. So here's the final project. I'm going to sew them together now. I've rearranged some of the squares to make sure that there are not two like ones side by side. And the light blue and the dark blue checkerboard 9 patches are sort of distributed throughout. It's kind of a fun project, and it certainly has kept me busy for the last couple of days. I'm going to sew my blocks together now, and I'll find something for a backing and make it into a quilt. I picked out some green pieces of fabric from my bin and sewed them together for a backing. Works well. And then I sandwiched with batting inside. I quilted it with my walking foot and just did diagonal rows of stitching on the surface. Put a binding on it with some of those other 2.5-inch blue squares, and voila, there it is finished. Got me through the week, and I hope you enjoyed this little video. See you next time.